This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale, and we've got another Montana Outdoor Podcast going for you. Thank you all for joining us. Special shout out and thank you to our active military all around the world. So many of you listen to this podcast, and we are very honored to have you here. And as I always say, I hope we bring a little bit of home back to you as you're off protecting us and doing all the great things you do. So thank you for your service. Now, we've had some really interesting podcasts here of late. We had to do 2 weeks in a row of the salmon podcast that we did with Trevor and Kid Johnson, because you guys kind of blew up our site over that one. But a lot of you sent me emails about, hey, how did the walleye egg collection effort go on Fort Peck? Because that's really important to us walleye fishermen. Kind of gives us an idea of, how things are going to go. So I thought, well, let's go straight to the expert there, Heath Headley, Fisheries Biologist extraordinaire. He's been on the program with us many times here. Heath, welcome back to the podcast, and thanks for joining us again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rigger.
Yeah. Hey, the walleye collection effort, of course, is an important one there on Fort Peck. It goes beyond, you're not collecting eggs for future walleye just for Fort Peck. This goes to other areas, correct?
Well, so, yeah, the eggs that we collect on Fort Peck, they go to other water bodies, and that's just here in Montana, primarily the eastern part of the state, central part of the state. And so that's the sole source for walleye eggs here in Montana. They originate from Fort Peck Reservoir.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we do collect a few northern pike eggs occasionally as well to meet stocking requirements. But we primarily focus on walleye.
Mm-hmm. Well, since the last time you had started out on the show, we have had, this podcast has grown a great deal. And, of course, we're very happy to see that. So I thought maybe you could give us just a little background on yourself and all that, just for so many of our new listeners who may not be familiar with you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing fish biology.
Sure, you bet. So I grew up in northeast South Dakota, kind of between Aberdeen, Watertown area, Glacial Lakes region. Pretty neat, unique area, a lot of sloughs, potholes, and lakes. And I guess, from early on, I was exposed to hunting and fishing. And my grandpa, we spent a lot of time together. He actually took me fishing quite a bit. And so that was always a good experience that I had and always interested me. We fish for a lot of different species, primarily perch, pike, and walleye in that area. And, there were some other species that we tried to catch too, but those were the big ones. And I think really that kind of set the stage for, I guess, my interest in fishing and fisheries and, just wanted to learn, more about why fish do what they do. And, and that kind of led me down the path of going to college, undergraduate school, South Dakota State University, and then getting some summer jobs, in that Northeast area, learning about the fisheries there and how things, work the way they did. And then I, after that, I actually went out to Wyoming, spent a little bit of time there, seasonal fish work as well. And then actually went to graduate school in Indiana in Ball State, and I worked up on southern Lake Michigan looking at, the yellow perch population dynamics up there. And then once I finished there, I ended up, I got a full-time position out here in Montana. I wanted to, get closer back to the Dakotas and further west, just recognize some pretty unique fishing opportunities and whatnot in the area. And I've been with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks since 2006.
Well, we're glad that you're here because you've always been such a great source of information for us. We're going to cover a lot of different things, mostly going to concentrate on walleye here in this podcast. But before we get into how the egg collection effort went and all that, I wanted to get a little history here. And I'll often get emails of people saying, I really think that walleye are native to Montana. And others go, no, I've looked at research. No, it's not. So I thought, well, let's see what your thoughts are on this. Now, if you look at the Montana Field Guide, and they didn't really help out too much here because and I'll read it, quote it here. It says, there are conflicting ideas among experts as to whether the walleye is native to Montana or not. Regardless, it is one of the most important sport fishes in Montana, in the eastern drainage, and elsewhere in the U.S. and in Canada, where the walleye is a much sought-after commercial fish as well. So where do you stand on that as far as, is the walleye a native fish to Montana?
So, we're going to have to go back to science, and, science, kind of says no. But, the one thing that, you kind of pointed out, Rigger, is it's regardless, whether or not they are or aren't. We, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, manages, walleye water bodies here in eastern and central Montana, and, put quite a bit of effort into monitoring these walleye populations on an annual basis, collecting data, seeing how they're growing, seeing if they're surviving, and, like we're going to talk about, stocking efforts. We invest a good amount of time and effort and manpower into going out, collecting eggs, and then hopefully having, enough fry and fingerlings down the road to stock these other water bodies. So, anglers have the opportunity to go out there and, have some good fishing success, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of stocking, one thing I did is I tried to do a little research to find out when stocking of walleye first got started in Montana, and I found two different answers to that. One said it was 1922, the other said 1933. Do you have any idea when the stocking of walleye in Montana waters started, Heath?
Yeah, that's kind of along the lines from, what we have based on historic records. I would probably lean a little bit more towards the 30s, though, as, a little bit more, I guess, solid information, better records, that sort of thing. And then, really in the 50s, that's kind of when things got going a little bit more, interest, I guess maybe peaked a little bit. And, and actually in 1951, that's when walleye were first stocked, by FWP in the Fort Peck Reservoir.
Okay. In 51. All right.
Yep.
Well, regardless, as you mentioned, they're here now and they are extremely popular. In fact, when you guys do the egg collection there in Fort Peck, we will always post, your progress, because you guys on your Facebook page are always doing little articles about how many you got so far in that. And so we'll repost it on MontanaOutdoor.com. And those are some of the most read articles that we post. So obviously we know this is something that is very much important to people. When did that egg collection effort start in Fort Peck?
So it actually started back in 1986.
Oh,
and so it's been going for, a long time. And, and actually around that same time, they were actually trap netting and trying to collect eggs from walleye from several other locations like Cooney, Tongue River Reservoir, Yellowstone River down around Intake. Just some ones that I know off the top of my head.
mm-hmm.
And just to, again, that's, this 80s period, that's when walleye interest really started to kind of take hold, and so therefore there was a kind of an interest and a demand, hopefully to provide some opportunities out there by, hopefully supplemental stocking. And, really what it boiled down to is, what they learned was that, Fort Peck was a pretty good, pretty reliable source for, numbers of fish and good sized fish and egg quality. And, that's kind of where it went from there, really.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of brings us up to today. And how did the walleye collection end up this year? And if you've got some numbers there, maybe show how it compares to last year and previous years.
Sure. Well, it went pretty well. We got started out at a more normal time this year than we did last year. I think probably some of the listeners recall one of the later ice cover periods on record, for Fort Peck. I mean, we didn't get out there last year until like the very end of April and a couple days in May. We still ended up doing okay. And like last year we collected 67 million eggs, I think, in a very short amount of time.
Right. Yeah.
But it was very condensed. Those fish, walleyes were like, every fish that we handled was kind of in walleye spawning mode, and it didn't take us long. This year, like I said, a little more normal. We started around April 10th, I believe, somewhere in there, shortly after ice was gone, and got our gear set up, trap nets out, trying to find, hopefully actively spawning fish. And we did hit a little bump in the road. We had some windy conditions and some cold temperatures. Matter of fact, I was kind of looking back through some of my water temperature stuff, and we had that one day, like it was Saturday. I remember coming to work and looking over, some of the little impoundments and whatnot. And I saw ice on the cover of them, and I'm just like, oh man, this isn't going to be good. And sure enough, we had water temperatures, checking our nets, like it was 38 degrees, and we were seeing some walleye right up before that, Dale, kind of in good numbers, and females releasing their eggs. We call them ripe, but that we hit that cold snap. It really shut things down for about 2, almost 3 days, and weren't catching walleye. But thankfully, the temperatures warmed back up, and the fish responded accordingly, moved back in, and when it was all said and done, we ended up with just over 80 million eggs. So we did well. Yeah. We did collect a few more eggs. Typically, we kind of want to get around 60 million eggs total. That kind of covers all our bases in terms of fry stocking, fingerlings, and fry that go into the ponds, at the hatcheries. So it went well, thankfully, other than just a little hiccup, but it was all good.
Mm-hmm. Well, and most of walleye fishermen in Montana know that this egg collection effort goes on because, like I say, they really watch our website and your website carefully to see how it's going. But I think a lot of them may not know actually how the process is done. Can take us through what that is like, the actual collection of it. You've got these trap nets. Maybe you can explain what that is, and then just talk about how you end up getting those eggs.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you mentioned, we have trap nets. They have what we call a lead line. It runs from the shore out to a series of frames and hoops. And basically, when these walleye are coming in shallow to spawn, look for other fish, look for rock gravel areas. They're cruising the shoreline pretty shallow. They hit that lead line, and it follows them right out to a series of cones. Essentially like a big minnow trap where they can get in, but they have a very difficult time of getting back out. And so we set those nets out. Typically we're trying to find warmer or ideal water temperature conditions, which is, 45 to around 50 degrees. That's where they like to be. And we check the nets every day, minus windy days where we can't get out there, but check them every day, sort through what we have for walleyes. Basically, there's ripe walleyes, which are females that are releasing their eggs, and green ones that we call them green, ones that are holding on to their eggs. And then, of course, the male walleye. And so we sort them all off. We do hold the green female walleyes for up to 4 days. We have some holding pens, and just to see if they'll ripen up, if temperatures warm up, they might start to do the same and start to release their eggs. If not, we just let them go. But yeah, so we collect the males down there as well. The whole egg fertilization process actually takes place down there on the water in the Big Dry Arm area. So we strip the eggs down there, add the milk, add the sperm. They get fertilized. We do go and add a solution called diatomaceous earth, which it keeps the eggs from clumping together. Because out in the wild, they're naturally sticking to rock and gravel until they hatch out. But since they're going to the hatcheries, we want to try and eliminate bunching or clumping together. They go in incubation jars, and you want them all nice and individual. Sometimes if they clump together, you can get bacteria, fungus develop inside, and basically end up losing a lot of your eggs, resulting in mortality. And we don't want that. So yeah, they get placed in that diatomaceous earth solution. They get rinsed off and then water hardened for a period of 1 hour. And that actually firms the eggshell up and allows them to be transported to the hatchery. They're pretty fragile during those initial stages, where the fertilization process is occurring. And then they head straight to the Miles City and Fort Peck hatcheries from there.
And both the male and female walleye, they live through that process, right?
Oh yeah, yep. We as soon as the female walleye eggs get stripped, we have netters, and I will say, and some people probably know, we have volunteers, that help us on this project, because there's a lot of fish and a lot of different processes going on. They'll take that female walleye, get it into a net once the eggs get stripped from one of the fish culturists, and then released right there, at our barge site. Yep.
Yeah, and then off they go, and then you probably see them the next year.
Yep.
So now you've got all these 80 million eggs or so. So out of those, how many will actually make it to being released back into the water once they hatch? Okay.
So, typically we can kind of expect to see around, 50%, hatching success or eye up. And so that's just basically, getting to the fry portion of it. And I will say, the fry portion, it's pretty unique and pretty interesting. Once those walleye hatch out, they have about 2 to 4 days to get on zooplankton. Otherwise they'll end up dying. So it's really critical once those fish hatch out and they get monitored, to either go directly into a water body, such as Fort Peck or somewhere else that, has a request for walleye fry, or go into the rearing ponds at Fort Peck in Miles City to be, stocked as fingerlings, a little bit later on.
Okay. So you'll take out of that, say, 40 million that's now, went and hatched, then you're going to take some percentage of just the brand new hatch fish, and they go right back in the water, and then some that
Yep.
you're going to continue to rear out and grow, and then move to different waterways. Okay.
Yep. And then again, kind of going to that next step, then sometimes, you see about another, again, 50% survival, from that fry to that fingerling stage, and it can vary. But that's one thing, like the hatchery personnel do a really good job of keeping tabs on, because, if you leave them in those ponds too long, and they get up to about 1.5 inches in size, they will actually start cannibalizing on one another, because they develop really good working mouth parts. They have, very small teeth at that time, and they'll start to look for other fish. So yeah, you might get bigger walleye, but you're not going to have as many of them. So it's a real careful balancing act that those guys keep tabs on.
Wow. Okay. So out of the little guys that just hatch and get into the water, do you have an estimate of how many of those would actually survive out in the wild? Because I imagine there's lots of other critters in the reservoir that eat those right up.
Oh yeah. No, it's definitely a scary environment out there for probably, a new small fish that's released. And it's not just other predators too. The other thing that goes into determining their survival is habitat and food. So water levels play a, kind of a important role and that sort of thing. But we did actually look at doing some research and looked at a, way of trying to determine, what kind of contribution we did see from like our fingerlings that we stock out in Fort Peck, along with some of the natural reproduction that occurs out there as well. And it was actually pretty neat in the fact that it was kind of over, 9 years, basically from like 2005 to 2013, where we looked at, again, survival, but it just happened to coincide with, huge fluctuations in reservoir elevations, basically low periods to all-time high. And what we saw was, as far as fingerling contribution during the low water years, when there wasn't a lot of spawning habitat out there, they weren't able to get into certain tributaries, hatchery contribution was, of fingerlings, that is, like upwards of close to 50%. So pretty impressive, for that particular year class. But when we saw reservoir elevations start to increase, greater amount of spawning habitat out there, those fish, natural reproduction started to occur more frequently. And so like 2011, I think, it was only like 18% contribution of hatchery reared fingerlings, for that particular year. Yeah. And so, just kind of the other take home message, I guess, is it varies quite a bit from year to year. And this is specifically on Fort Peck, but it could probably be, applied to a few other water bodies as well. And, that's why we don't see, strong year classes year after year. But at least in the case of Fort Peck, there's always some year classes that are swimming around out there, whether it be a contribution of, stocking efforts or natural reproduction.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, maybe you can talk a bit about how much, if you know, and I may be asking some stuff that's pretty hard to know, but as far as how many of those walleye that are in, let's say, we'll say Fort Peck are naturally just born right there in the water, and how many come from the hatchery or from your guys' effort. So we're going to talk about that right after this here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud authorized dealers of some of the most highly revered brands in the world, like Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has an unparalleled selection of cargo, utility, and dump trailers, and they still have a good selection of Boss snowplows as well. But the gang at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer knows that it takes much more than filling a lot with great inventory to be a company that folks can depend on. That's why they vowed to become the true experts in everything they sell. That's why they set their goals high, and I mean high. They can and will help you before the sale by finding you what you need to get the job that is in front of you done. Whether it is a new CM truck bed for the back of your truck or the perfect Boss snowplow for the front of it. Or maybe you need the Diamond C dump trailer to finally tackle that mess behind the barn you vowed you would get done once the snow cleared. The folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will not only find the perfect equipment to get those and about any other job done, they'll help you with financing, teach you everything you need to know about how to use that equipment, and will continue to be there for you when you need parts or full service. Bottom line is this: Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is your locally owned Boss snowplow, CM truck bed, and Diamond C dealer. They offer a wide variety of auto, truck, and trailer accessories and specialize in sales and service of trailers. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is located at 5680 Expressway. That's right in Missoula, Montana. You can also go see them on the web. That's rmtte.com. Sure, they'd love it if you came by, but feel free to find them whichever way you want. Just remember, when something needs to be hauled somewhere, there's no better place to start than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. That's rmtte.com. Go see them. And we are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. I'm Downrigger Dale, along with my guest, Heath Headley, biologist with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and just got done doing the big the egg collection effort on Fort Peck, and about 80 million were taken. So now we're talking a bit about what happens once these fish are either in the water or how many are actually produced naturally. So do you have any idea as far as how many walleye, and let's just use Fort Peck, for example, how many are just born naturally in Fort Peck and how many are actually introduced into Fort Peck or stocked, shall we say?
Yeah, so as far as an exact number, no, but like I mentioned earlier, based on that percentage, it's more of a percentage than anything, in terms of our contributions. Does that make sense, Dale?
Yeah. So it's really just based on, what you guys put into the water, and then the rest is just whatever Mama Nature allows to happen. Is Fort Peck considered a good breeding ground for walleye? I mean, obviously that wasn't their natural habitat, or is it very much dependent upon the efforts of FWP?
It goes both ways. And like I mentioned, water levels and forage conditions and spawning habitat all play a real important role. And in some years, natural reproduction can be phenomenal, really. And one thing that we did learn, from that study, was actually otolith microchemistry, is that, Fort Peck, at least, walleye are spawning in different parts of the reservoir. It's not, one location, and that's all,
Right.
that's a good thing, to have different options out there in case, one particular area, based on food and habitat isn't doing so good versus another, having that plan B, if you will, and then, combine that with, our stocking efforts, and, that obviously helps out a bunch as well. But what we saw was, like the Missouri River and upper portion of Fort Peck Reservoir, that is pretty pretty good and pretty consistent in terms of, natural reproduction up in that end, Rigger. And as a matter of fact, we don't stock any fish up in there because we don't want to be putting, stocked fish that are, on top of fish that are already naturally reproducing. We want to make sure they all have plenty of room, plenty of food, to grow and to survive successfully. And then, like I said, the big dry arm, that was identified as a pretty important spawning area. And again, when reservoir conditions allow, typically are a little bit higher and they can actually go up into some of the tributaries, they can be really successful as well.
Okay. And as far as, we mentioned earlier, there are some of these eggs are going into the Fort Peck hatchery, some are going to Miles City. Then when it's the reservoir gets stocked, there's more than just Fort Peck that gets stocked with walleye. What other water bodies are getting stocked from what you collect?
Yeah, so there's I think last I looked, there's around 20 other water bodies here in the state of Montana. Yeah. And I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I know at least over in our area, Region 6, we have Nelson Reservoir, Fresno, couple other smaller areas, impoundments. But actually people interested, they can go on our FWP website and look at our stocking plans and what's slated for the next upcoming years. And it'll have, by walleye, by location, what's planned on being stocked.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what would you say, and I know this is probably a tough one, but if you had to rank the health of walleye in Montana and primarily the area that in Region 6 there, would you say that the walleye population is pretty healthy? Let's say 1 to 10, is it a 7 or a 8, or what would you say?
I would say currently, thankfully, right up, we're right up there at the top right now, Rigger. The walleye population, based on some of our netting data, is above long-term average, over the course of about 30-year sampling period, and it's really comprised of a large, diverse age group. So we have fish, essentially from 1 year old all the way up to 20 years old. And as you can imagine, all different sort of sizes in between. So that's always really good and reassuring, to see that in sampling efforts. And then in addition, the forage that's out there too is really good. Our Cisco numbers have been really strong the last, actually close to a decade now. And we are seeing some shoreline forage like yellow perch, spot-tail shiners, crappies, things that the small walleye really rely on for their growth and survival as well. So yeah, things, currently look really good out here in Fort Peck.
Okay. Yeah, because what we have seen, I don't know if you saw the numbers from the tough guy tournament over there in Hell Creek, but that was just phenomenal. You're talking, 60 pounds over that did that. And I had heard from, everybody gets theories and all this of saying, well, okay, that's because there's a certain class of walleye that have really dominated. So we're getting a little spoiled, but that's going to be gone. And then we're going to see sizes going down. What do you say on that?
Yeah,
theory?
no, that is a, definitely logical and biological, safe bet to say, that particular year class, it actually goes back to what we learned in that, stocking natural reproduction study from 2011. And yeah, those fish, are averaging close to 30 inches and some a little bit more. And there's actually, a few older ones out there as well. There's a 2008 year class even swimming around out there. And so, yeah, it's pretty gosh darn good right at the moment. And the one thing though that I will say is we have a lot of young fish too in the system, Rigger, and that's always encouraging because, we want something to replace these fish down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
Will it ever be as big as this 2011 year class? Probably not, but I will say there's some really strong numbers of 15, 16-inch, 17-inch fish out there right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know some have said, well, to keep these fish around, maybe we ought to look at a slot limit, for during tournament time, because we do see a lot of walleye tournaments on Fort Peck. Is that something we need to concern ourselves with in changing what we're allowed to keep in that, or are we pretty sound?
No, we're really sound, and it's a good question. We're concerned about those fish, just like everybody else, and it's something that we evaluate on an annual basis, with our monitoring netting surveys, and then looking at our age and growth information, and then also creel surveys, and we see, even though we've seen some a fair amount of tournaments and increased angling pressure, but you also need to have in conjunction with that high harvest, and we just haven't seen that. Even our catch rates, they're not, super high. They're just kind of right where they need to be. So that's okay. That's telling us that, harvest, and mortality isn't, a huge issue. And again, look at that 2011 year class. They've been in the system for quite a while. So, it's telling us, from our monitoring sampling efforts that growth is good, habitat is good, and mortality is really low, and again, going back to your initial question of looking at some form of a length regulation, we started looking at it, several plus years ago, really, when everybody was concerned, which rightfully so, and things are still going pretty gosh darn well.
Well, now that's good news. That's really good news. I know that some people, some walleye anglers will say, now, when you catch those big females, which, any of the fish that are, 30-inch plus are probably female. There are a lot of anglers that'll say, throw that back, get a good picture, measure it, do what you got to do, but then get that fish back in the water. Is that something that you guys feel strongly about as well? What's your thoughts there? Because I know some guys say, hey, I want to keep this fish.
Sure.
What are your thoughts there?
Sure. Yeah, no, and it's there's no right or wrong answer. And it's good that, people want to release those fish. And, again, just one thing I will say about releasing fish is, just try and minimize handling as much as possible if you want to make sure it's, it's a good release, and hopefully survival is good as well. But then, if somebody, gets that fish of a lifetime, there's no biological justification that says, they can't get that fish mounted if they really want to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think, by and large, from what I've seen, fishermen, not just in Fort Peck, but around the state, I think they have a pretty good feel that, it's up to us to do the right thing. And so I think we're pretty fortunate that most of our fishermen are pretty responsible out there, don't you think?
Yes. Yep. And, even based on, some of our creel surveys and talking with anglers, out there, again, which is, kind of an important, they definitely, release fish at times, from time to time. So, yeah, that just kind of supports a little bit of, what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk a bit about how popular the walleye is. And I guess when you're like me or the captain or others that, we just love going after these fish. They're a lot of fun to catch. And of course, they're incredible eating fish. Where would you say the walleye is on the fish popularity scale? I tried to do a little research on this, and I couldn't find a lot of data on that. Do you have any data that shows what's the most popular fish to catch in Montana, and where would the walleye rank in that?
Yeah, so actually, we just got some information here, I think within the last year, and it comes from like our statewide fishing pressure estimate surveys. They do it every other year, but maybe no big surprise, but trout is right up there. They're number one,
Okay.
rainbows, but then walleye are right behind them,
Okay.
and so there's, like you said, a lot of, definitely interest and some pretty neat walleye fisheries, really, when it comes right down to it, that Montana has, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're we're awful lucky that one, we have so many different fish that we can target and fish for. In fact, that's one of the things I've been doing on my Outfitter series. Is I've been on the podcast. We just had Kit and Trevor Johnson on, but coming up here soon, we're going to have other outfitters on as well, and they're going to feature and talk about species and that. And that's one of the things that I just thought people might be interested in, is we tend to get where we know where the fish is, we know what's good fishing in this body of water, so we tend to stick with that, because if we want to drive, across the state, well, gee, I don't know if that's worth my time. I don't know that lake or that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to say is, hey, hire an outfitter for a day, learn that body of water, and now you got another place yet to go, and learn about some of these different species. And so, to me, I just think we're so fortunate that we have this incredible fishery out there, and of course, walleye being one that has done so well in Montana. Are there any plans, do you know, as far as introducing walleye into other water bodies? Or are we pretty well set? This is the way it is.
Yeah, I couldn't speak for anything beyond, the way it is right now. And again, I'm I'm only a small piece of the walleye puzzle, and I'm just out here on Fort Peck Rigger. So yeah, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, be interesting to see. But for now, there certainly seems to be plenty of walleye to go to go around.
Right. Right.
I think we're safe there. Do you have any thoughts or theories of why you think the walleye has become so popular in Montana? Because I would say walleye was probably not the number 2 as far as popular fish in Montana. I mean, that's got to be a fairly recent thing. Do you know why it got so popular?
I mean, I think for just kind of a couple of reasons that we, briefly touched on. I mean, there's some pretty nice walleye fisheries here in the state, and we're pretty fortunate to have. And some of them, are very capable of producing some good sized walleye. And I think that's always on people's radar. They want to catch that, hopefully big walleye. They're definitely in some very, unique and beautiful places, no doubt about it. Everything from the, out here in the plains, and the reservoirs, the rivers, to further west, or central Montana, I should say, and those systems out there. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, obviously, table fare, that's a big one. So, yeah, it's just a number of factors, I think, really.
What would you say is the most sought after body of water for walleye? Is there one lake that from your creel studies and that tends to be more popular for fishing for walleye than others in the state?
Well, I mean, Fort Peck ranks right up there. So, that's just kind of the big one and, kind of the go-to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard, and I don't know where these, like In Fisherman and some of these fishing magazines that I like to read, one had said that they estimate that Fort Peck is the 5th ranked number 5 in the world as far as walleye goes. Would you agree with that? Or again, I don't know where they get that, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you as far as an exact number, I guess, Dale, but
Mhm.
it's definitely on people's radar.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that, especially the last, several years with, social media and people, seeing what's been going on, with some of the tournament stuff and whatnot, for sure.
hmm What would you say is the biggest predator for walleye besides fishermen? I mean, in Fort Peck, what eats walleye?
I mean, the one thing I can say, and it's not just Fort Peck, and it's not just walleye. I mean, it's unfortunately the the crazy and humbling experience that we live in is that all fish eat all fish.
Yeah.
There's there's no real right or wrong answer, or no I don't know, smoking gun to point at
Mhm.
one particular species. But yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered that is, when you pull in a 30-incher of walleye, I always thought, well, this guy's probably pretty safe for the rest of his days or her days. Is that true, or is there something else that would eat a 30-inch walleye?
No, it would be pretty challenging at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're smaller, then you need to worry a lot. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned like perch and the Cisco are the some of the main things that walleye will go after in Fort Peck. Do you guys have any other ideas as far as other things that the walleye are eating out there?
Yeah, those are the primary ones, but they will eat, like I say, some crappie when they're really young.
Mm.
And actually we see that more in the western part of the reservoir where we typically have a little bit higher crappie numbers. They will eat some spot tail shiners and emerald shiners as well. And then we'll even see like a freshwater drum in some of the stomach
Oh,
contents as well. Yeah.
okay. Huh.
And even some shorthead red horse. That is another food item from time to time as well.
And what was the name of that one?
Shorthead red horse.
Shorthead red horse. Okay, now that
Yep.
one's a new one to me.
Yep. They're basically a sucker species, and they're
Oh,
native
okay.
to Montana. Yeah. Pretty neat fish, really.
Huh. Okay. So that's gives us a little idea of what our walleye are feeding on and going after. Do you have any thoughts as far as how I could become a better walleye fisherman?
um,
You think about that for a minute. We're going to take another quick break here and think about one. We've fished together a few times. If you got any suggestions, but maybe on the more broader thing of any suggestions you might have for fishermen as far as what they ought to do if they're really trying to target walleye. We'll talk about that, and I'll put you on the spot a little. You got to help me out here. I got to start catching bigger walleye. We'll do that right after this. I want to talk a bit about a very special company located in western Montana, Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They were established in 1977, and since that time, guiding customers through the woods has been their passion throughout their history. The main focus at Superior Hardwoods of Montana has been to provide the finest wide plank flooring and unique building materials available anywhere. One of the things I noticed right away about the owner of Superior Hardwoods of Montana, John Medliger, and his son Corey, and the rest of the staff there is they're very proud to offer the largest selection of in-stock flooring in the western United States. See, for over 40 years, they've been known for leading the industry in reclaimed and antique building materials, and the success that followed has allowed them to, now get this, stock over 11 acres of stunning architectural lumber that awaits the perfect addition to your home. One thing I want you to remember is just because they're located in Missoula, Montana, that does not mean they can't help you turn your home into a piece of historical art if you live somewhere else. They have been guiding folks from as far away as Hawaii and beyond through the woods for many years. So no matter if your project is located across the street from them, across the state, or somewhere else in the world, they can't wait to turn your house into a dream home. Their goal is simple. They stand ready to deliver the best choices with reliability and honesty, helping at any phase of a project with inspirational advice. And I'm not exaggerating when I say they actually treat their customers as friends and family. So the choice is yours. But if I were you, I would go to superior-hardwoods.com. superior-hardwoods.com. Of course, you're more than welcome to call them, 406-235-7452, or, they'd love you to visit 5120 Highway 93, just south of Missoula, Montana. They can't wait to guide you through the woods at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Go see them. You're going to love what they do to your home. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest is Heath Headley, a biologist, and now I'm really putting him on the spot here because I want to know, Heath, what am I doing wrong? How do I catch that big state record that I've been out there looking for?
Oh boy. Well, patience. Patience is always key when it comes to fishing. But yeah, no, I mean, it kind of, talk to other anglers, what they're doing. That always helps with, some tactics and locations. And one thing that I can say, and we've seen this with like some of our creel survey information, there's definitely times of year when walleye catching is at its peak, if you will, on Fort Peck. And for at least what we see on Fort Peck, that's, around the months of kind of end of June, getting into July, but then it tapers off. And a lot of that has to do with the forage that's out there too. But, those are kind of I guess a couple things that I can maybe help you out with a little bit, or at least information wise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's good info to have. And I will say that, I'm a work in progress, but by golly, me and the captain, we fish together a lot, and pretty much all the time. So that might be part of my problem. I just need to get a better partner. I don't know.
I wasn't going to say anything there, so I'm going to leave that leave that discussion up to you guys.
So, as a fisheries biologist for FWP, how often do you get to actually go fishing? Because you're constantly having to do all these things like the big, walleye collection effort and all that, the egg collection effort. Do you actually just get a chance to get out and fish much?
I do, but as like everybody else, it's tough to juggle, work and family and all that other stuff. But boy, absolutely. Whenever I get the chance and can find that window of opportunity, yes, I'm usually out there, fishing for, walleye or, whatever species really, I like to fish for all sorts of fish, and, no, it's just good to be out there. And then, in addition to that, I can, I enjoy talking to other anglers and other fishermen, just kind of seeing what they have to say and, comparing notes and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's one thing, folks, when you see Heath out there and that, stop and say hi and let them know your thoughts, because that especially when the FWP is asking for input on different things in those creel surveys, that's really important that fishermen give that input. That you guys rely on that quite often, don't you?
You bet we do. And and I like to thank all the anglers who have participated. We had one last year and then years prior, but no, thank you. I mean, it's a huge help. Gives us an idea of what's going on out there, and it helps in making, management decisions too on, what we should do moving down the road.
Mm-hmm. Well, I encourage all you walleye fishermen out there, and just all fishermen in general, to really respond to these things, because that helps the FWP a lot, and they do rely on it. So that's important. Anything else you want to talk about? One thing I did want to bring up is I'm hoping that you'll be able to join us down the road here and talk a bit about the Chinook salmon, and won't be long. We're going to be starting to focus on that as we get into later in July and in August. And that any a sneak peek as far as what you think the salmon season's going to look like?
Oh, I'm gonna maybe just hold on to that until we
Okay.
talk more in July.
Very good.
I'm looking forward to covering some Chinook salmon stuff on Fort Peck for sure.
Yeah. So you guys stay tuned to the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and we'll get Heath on and we'll talk about these Chinook salmon, which have become incredibly popular as well. So, well, Heath, I want to thank you for your time and for be sure and pass on to everybody there in the hatchery and all that on all the hard work you guys do, because this was another great egg collection effort. 80 million is a heck of a good number. So let's pat you guys on the back a little, because as fishermen, we depend on it a lot. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it as well.
All right, Heath. Well, we look forward to having you back on here very soon when we'll get the salmon stuff and give you a little information on chasing these big Chinook salmon around, which is always fun. But until then, folks, when you look on the podcast description, I'll put some links in there so you can get a link to that article that talks a bit about the egg collection effort and that. And then, do you mind if folks contact you via email at all, Heath?
Nope, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
My email address is headley@mt.gov.
And I'll put that in the podcast description there, and you'll just be able to click on that, and it'll open up your email program, and you'll be able to send Heath an email right there. And that way you don't have to try to remember it. It'll just be right there. Click on it, and off you go. So we'll put that in there too. And until then, Heath, thanks so much for coming on and being part of the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
You bet. Thanks again for having me.
Well, there you have it, folks. That'll get you up to date on the mighty walleye and what he and she are doing out in the waterways and that. But from what we just heard, it looks pretty dang good. Can't wait to see all of your pictures out there. Be sure and send them. My email link is right there in the podcast description. Plus, Manny will give you my email here in just a second. And send me your pictures. We'd love to post them on MontanaOutdoor.com. And be sure and share this podcast with your friends and neighbors. We love to get the word out and let people know about all the information we talk about here. Until then, be safe out there. Be good to each other. And we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.